wanted to explore this morning a little more in detail why it is that we seem to lose our bearings so frequently. Despite maybe even a strong resolve to keep ourselves mindful, it seems to have, there are gaps. And especially, of course, in a more hectic setting. In this setting, where there is tranquility, where the intention and focus for coming is to apply ourselves to the practice by being mindful, there can be a kind of corresponding continuousness of mindfulness in the course of the day, with some lapses, but for the most part, with practice and with the intention and with within an environment that has no distractions, no responsibilities, no one speaking to you, you can hold yourself to that intention fairly well. Not completely, not perfectly, but fairly well. And then, of course, as soon as things start speeding up, and it may not be anything more than a cross or mean look that somebody gives you, that speeds things up. Our practice has gone to the wind. What's happening there? What's going on? Because unless we understand what's going on and stop condemning ourselves for not being perfect in our mindfulness, which is the usual way, we just try to bear down with more force and more effort to make this thing act in accordance to our demands, which it will never do. But that's usually the way that most meditators work this. But what is really happening, unless we understand what is really happening, the problem will perpetuate. So, what's going on is that mindfulness for much of the early training really doesn't invite much into our life. It's nice to be aware, to be mindful, but it kind of has a neutral tone. It's not really where we have wanted life to be up until now. We've wanted it to be entertaining. We wanted life to be intense and offering me something so I can feel sort of on top of my game. And mindfulness doesn't offer that. It offers subtlety of appreciation, but first we have to learn how to appreciate life, how to let beauty in, how to allow ourselves to interact or interface with life so that we really feel the touch and value of what mindfulness can offer. But for our early training, our minds are too gross to open and let that be revealed. So there's a kind of self-serving model of mindfulness that, it keeps me from being reactive and it keeps me more settled and it does some nice things to me over time, but really in the moment of being mindful, I don't really see all that much value in it. I'm opening up the secret doors of our opinions in here. Most of us harbor these opinions, we just never say them. Okay? So we just let these things out and explore them. We think, I'm forsaking something that's so important and so spiritual. Well, no, nothing is forsaken. Everything needs to be exposed and asked questions about. So we're on our breath, and the breath itself may feel very neutral, and we're supposed to be on it for some reason that we don't quite understand, but we're on it because we're told to be on it. And so as we follow the breath in and out, a thought comes up. Now, a thought has a pleasure, or it has a feeling tone that can be very pleasant. A thought can capture the feeling tone of the experience that the thought is relating itself to. And so it holds, or an image could do the same thing, it holds the feeling tone of the experience that it was once paired. And so you can have a thought about the past that has not only the feeling tone, but the arising emotion within it that holds the pleasure and then manifests that pleasure in terms of what it says about what had happened and what it says in terms of its emotional expression, etc. So we're sitting here on our neutral breath, and a thought comes, which is exciting, which holds something, offers something to me, seems to. So what am I going to do? Am I going to stay with this neutral breath? Nobody's looking. When I go off into thought, lights don't flash and say this yogi's is thinking. If nobody knows. So, okay, nobody knows, I'm going. And so off we go. Off we go into the abstract. And it's because our life is still positioned towards the pleasant experiences. It hasn't found or discovered the interest, the richness within awareness. It hasn't spent enough time in awareness for the payoff of awareness to be perceived. And it's a very rocky boat for a long period of time because we really are much more interested in the dramatic qualities of our thinking than in resting in the neutral tones of ordinariness. And so, and especially leaving a retreat and getting more into the hectic display of life, where we're no longer in a guarded environment. We give our service to the thoughts about what we need to do, the planning, the emotional residue of what's arising, all of the lights and flashes and colored objects of the world are much more fascinating than an awareness that we only have a partial service to. And so, leaving retreat, suddenly we're back to our primary destination and intention, which is to milk life for the pleasures I can get out of it. And I can do that through my thoughts, through my excitement, through my intensity, through ratcheting up the level of energy. And the mindfulness, we think in the back, well, I wish I were mindful. I lost all my mindfulness. No, you chose to give it away. You chose to go to the thought rather than to base yourself in experience. If we choose to do it. It's our intention to do that. And then we get very self-deprecating about how awful of a Dharma student I am, and what if I'm really going to, next year I'm going to spend the whole year at Forest Refuge. I'll show me. Dr. Jekyll, Miss Hyde approach to this thing, isn't there? It's because we haven't been seasoned within awareness. And exposure to awareness is what seasons us. Not thoughts about how good it would be to be aware. How nice it's going to be when I'm enlightened. All those are self-serving thoughts that feed the egoic sense of its interest in pleasure. It's the exposure. It's actually because what happens when we are no longer forcing this awareness upon us as something that I really need, I don't want, but it's something that it's like medicine. When we access it from relaxation, from ease, the tenderness of life comes forward. The heart. Appreciation. Fullness. Fullness. People say, emptiness. Nonsense. Emptiness is a word that will scare us back into the cave of our pleasure. But what about fullness? Completion. See, the frame of reference is removed within this new paradigm. And we are fed like nothing has ever fed us before. And then when it closes down, which it will, with the inevitable conditioning contraction that we find ourselves in, this is not, the intention is so well established, it is so well known now what we are opening up to, that this is not going to be dismissed from my life, and it's not going to be a should. This is going to be an absolute necessity of intention. And it's now going to receive primary focus, not secondary focus. When pleasure was my primary focus, this was the secondary focus. Now it becomes the primary focus. And everything feeds the primary focus. And our life is at service to that primary focus, that primary intention. And the view that it begins to offer us is one of heartfelt connection, of love. That's what we're doing when we sit laboredly focused on our breath. We are already opening a portal. And that portal's manifestation is directly, inversely proportional to the size of me who wants it. The size of me diminishes in all of its argument of why it's so important in my life, and all of that. As that diminishes, as we become more vacant, then the availability of awareness increases. And as that self-serving, because it's not going to, anything, when the self is primary in our life, then our life is self-serving. It can't be anything else. Even helping helps me, because now I'm thinking of myself in the image of being a helper. That's self-serving. And self-serving awareness is buffered out, away. It can't reach us, because awareness is not self-serving. It's interconnected. And so self-serving intentions block, obstruct. So you can see that if you think you're going to do this thing, self-serving intention, self-serving awareness is the very thing that's going to keep this thing at bay. And that requires a reorganization of our whole practice from a model of self-made to one of inclusivity, of openness. And may it be so.